the past few years, I've broken down basically every single Todd Howard interview, but I think this interview between Todd Howard and MrMattyPlays may be the single best Todd Howard interview out there right now, because in this one, we're getting insightful questions that Todd Howard will actually answer. We just learned a ton more about the future of Fallout, Starfield, and the Elder Scrolls. The full interview is of course on Matty's channel, but here I'll be highlighting some of the big things as well as sharing my own thoughts and interpretations on them. Todd Howard gets into the future of Fallout and what we could realistically expect around that, but also some surprising updates on Starfield. This game is going to be far more active than I think many of us were expecting, and we even get some initial details on the Elder Scrolls 6. If you're an Elder Scrolls fan, I honestly think this interview is kind of like Christmas morning in a lot of ways. So please, give the full interview a watch. I cover the big stuff, but Matty gets into a ton more detail, and frankly, anytime a creator is interviewing an exec, that's going to be a win for all of us. But kicking things off, we get to hear about the future of Fallout from the perspective of Todd Howard. Todd Howard agrees with the sentiment that Fallout has never been more popular than it is right now. Most people will then immediately jump to, okay, well why aren't we getting new games then? But Todd Howard has a bit of a different perspective on Fallout. He describes how Bethesda has never really stopped working on Fallout. They have Fallout 76, which has been getting consistent updates over the past 5.5 years. So while many fans are sitting here like, well, we desperately need a new Fallout game, from Bethesda's perspective, or at least Todd Howard, there is a Fallout game out there that is getting a steady flow of content. And contrary to some of the other headlines or even just fan sentiment as of late, Todd Howard doesn't think the next Fallout game should be rushed.
You know, we don't feel like we need to rush any of that. You know, right now, the Fallout TV show fills a certain niche in terms of the franchise and storytelling. Totally get the desire for a new kind of mainline single player game. And look, those things take time. I don't think it's bad for people to miss things.
Right.
As well. So we just want to get it right and make sure that everything we're doing in a franchise, whether it's Elder Scrolls or Fallout or now Starfield, that those become, you know, meaningful moments for everybody who love these franchises as much as we do.
And right off the bat, I think we're starting to see an interesting dichotomy currently happening at Bethesda. We just recently heard from Jez Corden that Microsoft wants the next Fallout game out sooner, potentially even working with other devs who aren't named Bethesda to make that a reality. But conversely, in this interview and even some past, we hear Todd Howard mention how he doesn't want to rush things around Fallout. And I think we're at this point where a disconnect is occurring. From these recent Microsoft rumors, it really sounds like someone else is getting to do a Fallout remaster or a spin-off or something, while Todd Howard is perfectly fine taking his time with the Elder Scrolls 6 and then eventually working on Fallout 5 if that's what they want to do next. And his core goal is to make sure those games are great as opposed to increasing their bottom line, which is obviously going to be a far larger focus for Microsoft right now. And this just makes sense to me. ZeniMax is just sold to Microsoft a few years ago. You have to imagine to go along with that, there's a bit of a sigh of relief like, okay, we don't have to stress about the bottom line nearly as much anymore. We'll have a bit more creative freedom. So I think we will likely see more Fallout, but it probably won't be from Bethesda Game Studios directly, and instead developed by someone else. Fallout 76 specifically has never been more popular than it is right now, this thanks largely to the TV show, but Todd Howard describes here how Bethesda Game Studios has an internal roadmap for what they're going to be doing next with Fallout 76, and we do get one of those big questions that many in the Fallout community have been asking around this game. Have they considered charging for Fallout 76 DLC? As of right now, every single DLC for this game is a free update, supported by microtransactions and the season pass. But many fans who love Fallout 76 want more content. They're like, hey, I'll take out my wallet and pay for good content if you add it, which is the exact model that ESO uses. But here, Todd Howard describes how they want everyone to play all of the content and how it's a pretty unique experience with everyone flocking to new content together because they can all do that. It's free. So Todd Howard basically confirms that no, Fallout 76 will not be getting paid DLC in the future. But then we get another phenomenal question from Matty where he asks about the dynamic between Fallout 76 and a potential new Fallout game on the way. Many members of the community have had this concern that a new Fallout game won't happen anytime soon since it'll step on or even cannibalize the sales of Fallout 76.
Look, that's a really good question. And when you're sort of starting those things, but we have that fear as well. Is one game going to cannibalize another? I think the good news is as long as like the initial releases are spread out a little bit, they don't. They both find their audiences, right? Like Skyrim is still one of our most played games, while Elder Scrolls Online is celebrating their 10th anniversary and doing really well. We've noticed even when we update those games, they don't really cannibalize each other. And then you see it with Fallout 4 kind of hitting #1 on the charts and then
Sure.
76 right behind it. And so, I mean, logic would say there's a little bit of cannibalization between the two, but much, much less in practice than we thought between these games. So when there's another Fallout, we'll call it classically single player game, my expectation is 76 is just as healthy as it is today.
And I think this response is actually a pretty big deal. I think a decent chunk of the community just kind of had this notion that a new Fallout game could end support for Fallout 76. Like whenever Fallout 5 comes out, Fallout 76 will kind of just go away. But Todd Howard seems quite explicit in saying that this isn't the case. From Bethesda's perspective, Fallout 76 will continue to live on side by side with a new single-player release. And this too makes sense. Bethesda Game Studios Austin is a bit of a unique studio compared to the rest of the company. That's the main studio supporting Fallout 76, and as such, they have a far larger focus on multiplayer. And this does suggest that we could have an absolutely insane year for Fallout. Fallout 76 is more popular than ever. It's gaining more support as a result of the TV show and will likely get bigger DLCs going forward. But we also are hearing how Microsoft wants a new Fallout game, so we could get a new Fallout game as well as bigger updates for Fallout 76 all at the same time. But we also get that question on remasters, as Matty does ask, is there a plan to modernize the original 2 Fallout games?
A main priority for us is to make sure they're available and you can still play them. So on the PC, obviously they're there for people to go and get and play, and making sure that, they run okay. As far as sort of beyond that, we've talked about it, but, our priorities in terms of, hey, let's go do dev work and make certain things work. They haven't been in those areas. So sure. we wanted to load up and run well. The rest of it, like I could argue, I think some of the charm of games, from that area in the original Fallouts is a little bit of that age. I would never want to sort of, paste over some of that with, we changed how this works, so it's more modern. Again, so as long as you can download it, as long as it loads up and runs, I think I'd like people to experience it the way it was.
This is a response we've heard several times from Todd Howard now. He specifically seems to just really like games in their original form, not some kind of modern overhaul or remake. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure how to interpret this one. On one hand, it definitely seems to suggest that a Fallout 1 or 2 remake is out of the cards in the near future, but let's not forget this is a Microsoft IP now. The second they feel like it makes financial sense to start remaking older Fallouts, they'll probably start doing that. And even further, like I mentioned, Todd Howard has been saying this for years now. If you go back to E3 2018 and 2019, you can find similar quotes around remasters. But we saw how in 2020, Bethesda had plans to remaster Oblivion and Fallout 3, according to this internal roadmap. So just because Todd Howard is saying he's not a huge fan of remasters doesn't mean that we aren't getting them. If anything, it feels like over the last year, Xbox and Microsoft have been exerting more influence on some of these studios, which makes me think remasters could definitely be in the cards, or hey, maybe all of this just ended up canceled in favor of a spin-off game. But I think overall, we got a pretty interesting outlook on Fallout as a franchise from Todd Howard here. Because all of these answers effectively boil down to, yeah, you have Fallout 76, a ton of people are playing that right now, so why are we going to do anything else? We'll take our time and we'll make Fallout 5 one day and we'll make sure it's a good game. Obviously, many Fallout fans want something new sooner than that because Fallout 5 might be coming in the mid-2030s at this point, but I still have the suspicion that Microsoft might be playing a larger role behind the scenes as Fallout spin-offs might be starting production right now. But we do get some major updates on Bethesda's strategy going forward because it seems like they're going to have a major strategy shift. And to me, what actually ends up becoming one of the most telling aspects of this interview overall is around Bethesda's evolving support plans for their games.
That expectation that we'll update them for years is true. We would look back at Skyrim, which we're still updating to a small extent, and there's all of the creations and mods there. Still a hugely played game. Same with Fallout 4, that we wish we had supported them longer, right? And we're still doing work there. So, and that's the trick. Like, as we sit here right now, our games have never been more popular. We have last month 25 million players in our games. And so the trick for it's just like a staggering amount of people and players that we hear from, where our number one job always is like, how are we serving that audience on a month-to-month basis? So we're taking care of them while also developing, new products.
This has been something that's been popping up in a bunch of Todd Howard interviews and really just Bethesda interviews in general. They keep mentioning how people are playing their games for longer than ever. And we constantly heard with Starfield how they want to support Starfield for longer into the future. But now we're starting to actually hear concrete details on how they plan to do that. And this all is a trend I think most of us are noticing. Bethesda is not only updating their games more frequently, but building out systems to bring a steady flow of content to their games for the foreseeable future. And Todd Howard does go on to confirm here that the same idea of games with longer tails and support will continue with the Elder Scrolls 6, as we are starting to see this evolution into Bethesda games almost as games as a service, with far more updates and DLC following the release. And as we get into some of the Starfield talk, we hear even more around how Bethesda is evolving in this direction. The cadence between updates on Starfield moving forward will vary. Right now, the target is once every 6 weeks for updates, but some larger gaps may come, and perhaps even some smaller gaps depending on what they're currently working on. But right now, Bethesda is working on their Starfield Year 2 plans, and that may mean the 6-week update cadence they're targeting right now goes away. And just right off the bat, this is a pretty major revelation. I think many of us kind of thought that Bethesda Game Studios would make the Shattered Space expansion because everyone bought that with the Premium Edition, but then move on to the Elder Scrolls 6, and that kind of be where Starfield is left with paid mods supporting it for years to come. But no, that couldn't be farther from reality, as Starfield is going to be getting a ton of support, as Todd Howard shares quite a bit more about Starfield's first and future expansions.
And I don't think people realize is that Shattered Space, the bulk of that expansion pack, pretty much, once you get to the city and the planet, it takes place there.
That's going to be one of my questions.
It allows us to build a landscape like we would traditionally do and have the city and the quest. And so that story takes place there, and the landscape's kind of, content-wise, we're looking at kind of like what we do with Far Harbor on Fallout 4. We're like, okay, this is a scope that works for, our development in doing this kind of annual story expansion type of thing. So really excited about that. And it lets us, kind of do some things the way we would in previous games and give people not completely that experience because it's still Starfield.
Sure.
But, this new kind of alien world that you're able to explore, and it takes place there.
So this was a huge response, perhaps the biggest answer in this interview overall. First off, Shattered Space taking place on just one planet is massive. Todd Howard comparing it to Far Harbor is to reflect everything just kind of being its own thing. We'll travel to a totally new planet, experience a completely unique culture, and meet a bunch of new characters along the way. And the fact that it's all just there on one planet with a major city, and it's no longer going to be fast traveling around the galaxy with tons of load screens, could make this DLC a massive hit with a ton of players. Those load screens were one of the principal complaints around Starfield for most people who otherwise enjoyed the game. And it does seem like Bethesda/Todd Howard are recognizing that feedback, as he does mention during this that it allows people to play things more similarly to past games, which is one of the biggest complaints around Starfield and its travel system. But building off what was said earlier with Bethesda games having longer tails moving forward, Todd Howard confirms here that Shattered Space is just the first annual expansion for Starfield, and more will be coming in the future. They're already planning the next one, and Todd Howard goes on to say he hopes these annual expansions continue for years to come. A Far Harbor-sized expansion each year for the next few years is massive. And taking this together with his comments earlier, you have to imagine this will also be a thing for the Elder Scrolls 6, or at least is loosely planned to be that way for that game. It seems like Bethesda is taking an almost Ubisoft-esque approach to maintaining their games for years after release, with major pieces of DLC coming out as opposed to just one or two around release and then moving on. And personally, I love this. I've actually mentioned it in several past videos that I hoped Bethesda would do exactly this, because I think Bethesda games specifically really lend themselves to be expanded this way on a somewhat regular basis. Many of these expansions are often contained stories in new locations. They don't impact the previous content all that much. But this does really feel like one of the biggest shifts we'll be seeing with this company moving forward, as this does mean we'll be seeing a lot more content from Bethesda on a regular basis. If you're an Elder Scrolls fan right now, I would be creaming. Assuming this model is a success for Starfield, we could see the Elder Scrolls 6 drop in 2026, and imagine every year until 2030 another DLC-sized expansion drops, giving you a solid dozen or two more hours of content. This feels like a win-win-win. Bethesda fans desperately want more content for their favorite IPs, and now Bethesda can provide that to their audience on a regular basis. Plus honestly, thus far, Bethesda expansions have really been some of their best work over the past decade. But even beyond that, we hear a bit more about the Elder Elder Scrolls 6 and how some of the changes from Starfield will carry over. As Todd Howard does confirm, lots of the tech used in Starfield will continue to be used in the Elder Scrolls 6 and even expanded on.
And, a lot of the Starfield technology is the starting point for Elder Scrolls 6. And then obviously we try to do another jump up in technology with looking at, what's coming in the future, how do we do that, and always be moving the ball forward.
For a long time, people have been speculating that the ship system could be repurposed into a ship system, aka boats for the Elder Scrolls 6. But with another phenomenal question, we also hear Matty ask if a spin-off Elder Scrolls game could happen. Does anyone else get to work on Elder Scrolls outside of Bethesda? Todd Howard describes how they're protective of all of their franchises, and he doesn't think spin-off Elder Scrolls games are really what people want.
There are a lot of things we look at with Elder Scrolls. You mentioned an immersive Dark Brotherhood sim. I'm not suggesting that wouldn't be a bad game, but I don't view that as filling some hole. I mean, I think what people want out of Elder Scrolls is a mainline game like Skyrim, like Oblivion.
Let me know in the comments. Do you agree with that one? Matty brings up some of the recent pushback on pricing when it comes to Starfield creations. There's a $10 ship module and a $7 quest, and a lot of people are frustrated about that. We've actually seen the review scores drop even lower as a result. And specifically around this new Trackers Alliance quest, a lot of people are frustrated because it's a new direction for Bethesda. There's a free one that's great and introduces you to the faction, but then a paid one that is considerably shorter, yet still $7, and Bethesda plans to release more of these bounty quests in the future. So a lot of people are upset around them selling quests in general, but also just upset around the value proposition.
Yeah, we hear that feedback too. And, first of all, I say that stuff gets priced based on, things that we've done before, both in Creation Club and then Fallout 76. And we're always trying to be kind of looking at what else is out there, really make sure we're giving value to everybody. And where we're not, hey, we definitely will adjust. The one thing I want to say on the Trackers Alliance, that was really an attempt to something we did in Creation Club where we'd say, hey, you get this special outfit and you get this special weapon. We kind of wanted to put them together and then thought, let's go the extra mile and wrap those around a quest. But now we definitely see the feedback, right? And it's like not what we want at all in terms of, oh no, this looks like a faction that we're chopping up and then selling for 700 credits at a time. And so I do think we're going to take a look at that and how we deliver content, like that, and whether we're changing pricing or breaking it up or what we should do there. So great feedback from the community.
And yeah, that response from Todd Howard, I think, is what most of us were looking for. The value proposition on this mission wasn't right, and Bethesda will seemingly be adjusting that moving forward. Whether that means more content or lower prices, we don't really know yet, but seemingly they have heard the feedback, and hopefully we do see this reflected. Although, if you're hoping for some of these paid missions in Starfield to go away completely, that doesn't seem like it's happening. Definitely sounds like microtransaction missions are staying around. And Todd Howard does go on to explain that from Bethesda's perspective, these creations allow many creators to go from hobbyists to professionals. And this in turn lends itself to a healthier modding community as you have professionals now making mods. And while, yeah, I do get that perspective and appreciate it, I am very curious to see where things go with Starfield paid mods. It will likely have an impact on the modding scene overall because this is the first time we've ever had free and paid mods launch at the same time for one of their games. So it's one of those situations where if you're making a really high quality mod, why wouldn't you just list it as a creation and sell it for money? Why would you release it for free? For some creators, they're not interested in making money off their mods at all, but I'm just curious to see where things go. You have to imagine this will have some kind of impact on how the modding scene around Starfield evolves over the next few years. We also get a question around Starfield 2 potentially happening, or Bethesda even branching out to more new IPs. But Todd Howard makes it clear that the objective of Bethesda right now is nurturing those franchises that they have already, as opposed to branching out even more. And Todd Howard does confirm that Starfield has had over 14 million players with an average playtime of 40 hours per player. And although I don't have all of the data to look at for every game, this seems absolutely incredible. Thus far, we've really seen no indication that Starfield is a failure like many people try to claim. And what I think was genuinely one of the most important answers from Todd Howard here, he is asked about some of the negative receptions and narratives around the Fallout TV show. And specifically, Bethesda not liking New Vegas, as that narrative popped up around some of the choices they made with the plot of the TV show. But Todd Howard's response, I think, really applies to anyone creating something on the internet and just putting it out there for others to consume.
Look, the stuff that we do, you reach a level of popularity and a hype, and you just have to understand, like, for us, I know a lot of that comes with it. Okay. And you do grow a pretty thick skin. If you really want to do this, you have to grow a thick skin in accepting the criticism. That's what makes us better. And these franchises and the time that people spend in the games, they're really, really important to them. It's not always pleasant to read. No, it's like you wish people would be nicer, but it does matter a lot to them. And so I usually, and yeah, well, the answer is yes, it does affect people here. They put their hearts and souls into these projects for years and years, and they care about it, all of us, so much to do the best job that we can. But at the end of the day, the fans and the consumers, they should, if it's not living up to what they want out of it, we expect that criticism. We need to hear it, and we need to get better. And we're really, really welcoming of it. We're actually like our harshest critics here in terms of all of that. And so you do get used to it. You do have to grow a thick skin, and just, we love it so much that, look, that's part of it. We know it's coming. And look, we dive into Reddit a lot. Well, I'll probably read all the comments on this video. So, hey, everybody, yeah, I'm reading them. Be nice. Or don't be nice. If I say something stupid, call me out on it. It's fine. And I've done that, in enough interviews to know. So, but I'd say the same thing to any creator out there, whether it's what you do, Matty, and making these videos, or people making music, putting on SoundCloud, or doing all of these things. When you're a creator, no matter what you do, whether you're a game developer, an artist, or whatever, that's going to be part of your experience. And you just have to make sure for yourself, like, do we love this? Do we feel good about it? If so, then we're going to put it out there. Hopefully it'll find an audience that feels the same way we do.
As I mentioned before, I think this response is fantastic, and on a personal level, I completely agree. I've experienced a lot of this on a smaller scale myself, where after a certain point, once the audience gets large enough, you'll always upset someone. Annoying 1% of the audience is still a lot of people. And for Bethesda, that's on a crazy large scale. So I think Todd Howard's answer here is important for creators to hear, because there is this fine line. You'll get lots of hate, but there is that line of truth there, where somebody might be saying something rather rude, but that doesn't make it untrue. And it definitely seems like Bethesda is hearing some of that feedback, and when it comes to Shattered Space, it seems like they're implementing at least some of it. But overall, I thought this was an absolutely fantastic interview. It hits on the core of a lot of the things being asked by the community around Fallout, Starfield, and even the Elder Scrolls to a degree. Truly one of the best Todd Howard interviews out there right now, and if you're interested, give the full thing a watch, because there's plenty of things I didn't cover in this video.